Oh yeah, yeah. You know, even people that don't have that religious inclination, we're going to find out when we talk about the rise of Shah Ismail and who creates the Safavid dynasty, that after he kills the Uzbek chieftain Muhammad Shabani, he's going to turn his skull into a drinking fountain. Yeah, the Checheniks did that, and other steppe nomads did. That way, so waste not, want not, I guess. You know. Yes, Timur, sure, definitely, and we'll talk about it in detail. So at this particular point, we've given you, I think, a good enough background into Zoroastrianism, into the faith. Whatever I mention later about Zoroastrianism, I'll mention with regard to political units that are created. Now, first of all, by the middle of the 7th century BC, the later Assyrian Empire holds sway over the Middle East. By the middle of the 7th century BC, the later Assyrian Empire will hold sway. Now, the Assyrians were great conquerors, but the Assyrians, for the most part, were parasitic. They didn't really care about the peoples they ruled over. They ruled by terror, and they would advertise this terror in their art. They would constantly show people who disobeyed them being flayed, having their skin ripped off their bodies, being impaled on stakes, okay, where a person would be forced to sit down on a sharpened stake that would pass through their rectum and out their skull. Okay, the idea is simple. The idea is, you mess with me, I will make life painful for you. Okay, you're going to die, and die painfully. Now listen, each and every one of us is going to die. That's the fact. Okay, but no one wants to go in a painful way. The Assyrians are going to justify their conquest by the fact that they're victorious in war. Now, are they any more or less brutal than the Persians that come after them? Probably not, but let's just say that they advertise their brutality more. Okay? We're going to find out that Darius and Xerxes, even though they are men of culture, could also be brutal. Now, by the middle of the 7th century BC, one of the early Middle Eastern societies was that of the Elamites. And the Elamites will be taken over by the Assyrians, and the Elamites' capital, which is an advanced city that is referred to as Susa. Okay? It would basically be in the south of Iran. Now, what's going to happen is the Assyrians, because they rule by terror, will cow many people, make them very scared to revolt. Okay? But there are others who hate them so much that they want to actually kick them out themselves, which means that you're going to need a confederation of people that are going to rise against the Assyrian oppressors. And you're going to get two of them join together and take out the Assyrian Empire in the year 612. The two are the Chaldean Babylonians, or those that are called Neo-Babylonians. You know that Babylon is a great city of culture and wealth in the ancient world. The Chaldean Babylonians will be led by their leader, a very skillful general, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, you don't have to spell his name. Yes?
So that was the Elamite Confederation of the Babylonians?
The Elamite Confederation will be taken over by the Assyrians in the mid-600s. After that, you're going to see a union of Chaldean Babylonians with a group of Iranian speakers called the Medes, who are going to unite. And in 612, they're going to put to the torch the Assyrian capital of Nineveh.
So the Chaldean Babylonians unite with the Medes
Against the Assyrians. That's right. And in 612, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, Nineveh, will be put to the torch. If you wanted the Jewish account of it, read the prophet Nahum, okay, in the Old Testament. Oh, Nineveh, bloody city, who shall bemoan thee. You know, basically the idea that you got your just desserts. You treated the Jews badly, you treated others badly, you deserve what you got. Now, I want to focus on the Medes in particular, not the Chaldean Babylonians. We'll get to them later. Ruling?
Sorry.
Yes. Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire, Erica, and it will be sacked. It will be destroyed by a combination of the Medes and the Chaldean Babylonians. They're going to unite together in unity of their strength. Both have good armies, and they attack the Assyrians, and they basically wipe them out as a governing force. Okay?
Jonah had went to investigate.
That's right. Very good. The prophet Jonah went to Nineveh to get him to repent. And before I answer Sean, I had dissed Sean before, I'm sorry. If you remember in the book of Jonah, all 4 chapters of it, Jonah basically is sent by God to basically tell the people of Nineveh to give up their wicked ways. And he doesn't want to do it, so basically he ends up getting swallowed by sea beasts, most notably the whale, right? The story of Jonah the whale. And of course, the reason why Jonah doesn't want to preach to the Assyrians is not because he thinks they'll reject him. It's that he hates them so much. He figures that if they basically atone for their sins, that God will forgive them. And so he'd rather they just suffer the wrath of God. But that's very true. That's very good. And Sean, I'm sorry.
I'll ask my other question after class. But so the Chaldean Babylonians and the Medes, do they come from within the Assyrian Empire?
Yes, within. They're going to basically be what you would call tributary peoples that are conquered and have to pay tribute to the Assyrians. So basically what's going to happen is ruling the Medes in the waning decades of the century, was their king Cyaxares. He is the Median king. That's a very good question, and I was waiting for someone to ask that because his name sounds great just now. Okay? These are actually the Greek names for him. A lot of times we don't know the indigenous names. Most of what we know about this period is from Herodotus. And Herodotus gave names that seemed very alien to him, Greek names. Okay? And basically that's a sharp observation. Now Cyaxares is going to replace the Median tribal levies, and the tribal levy means you're going to get troops upon request. You're going to get them for an emergency. Think of it as a type of militia. And they're loosely organized with their own individual tribal leaders. Cyaxares is going to replace the loosely organized tribal levies with a new army of archers, spearmen, and cavalry. And in 615, I'll be with you in a second, Paul. In 615, they basically are going to attack Assyria originally, 615 BC. It's Cyaxares that helps the Babylonian army annihilate the Assyrians. Okay? So it's Cyaxares that's going to be important for this dismantling of the Assyrian Empire, which is no more. Now, Paul, you had a question.
There were, in that area, especially in Anatolia, there were this lot of people that came from there.
I gotta be Definitely. Along the Ionian coast littoral, you had Greek pockets, Greek enclaves, which the Persians will come into contact with. Oh, definitely. Ilium, right? Sure, definitely. Marcos? This is 612 that once again Assyria is destroyed. Think of the year 612 BC as the destruction of the Assyrian Empire. And Sean, and then we'll go to Josh.
So basically create a state army?
He's going to create an army that's responsible to him directly, not just tribal levies. And they're going to be specialized fighters.
So are they owned ready?
Yes, yes. They're a standing army, not a militia. Okay, very good. And Josh, and then Faisal.
Yeah, you said 612 was the revolt by the the Chaldean Babylonians and the Medes, right?
That's right.
And then 615 was when
615 is when he's actually organizing this army, and he utilizes it in 612.
so there's like a smaller revolt. Oh, wait, he uses it.
Remember, this is BC.
Right.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
615 is the beginning of the revolt, and like the beginning of the end for the Assyrians, and then 612 is when it gets finished off.
You understand that correctly? Okay, Faisal?
Anything for the area that Assyrian ruled?
Okay. First of all, the Assyrians looked a pretty wide area. Okay? The Assyrians would basically rule. At one point, they had Egypt briefly under Esarhaddon in 671 or so. But at their widest extent, they would basically reach to about Cairo and to both flanks of the Nile Valley. Because when you conquer Egypt, you didn't really look to conquer only Egypt. A lot of it is desert. You only want to control the Nile Valley. That's where the arable land is. That's where crops are grown. That's where you get taxes from. That's where you get wealth from. And they're going to take over they're going to take over the Iraq, Syria, what would be the modern states of Lebanon and Israel, and parts of Turkey and parts of Iran. Yes, Paul?
This is what warfare was from this time to chariots,
That's right.
places Islam,
That's right.
right?
That's exactly
The
right.
Medes and the Chaldean Babylonians that time. What did the Assyrians have?
The Assyrians basically would originally had bronze in their old empire. Then they developed iron themselves. But the fact of the matter was, it wasn't a technological advantage that the Medes and the Chaldean Babylonians had over the Assyrians. It was an organizational advantage. And the fact that they basically banded together with more men, disciplined men, and they basically attacked the Assyrians when they were vulnerable.
There was also the thing with the Chaldeans.
Yeah.
They were like, that was like back then.
Well, I don't want to go into the evolution of warfare. I think that would be better discussed by Dr. Wintermute, who specializes in that. You will see chariots come from West Asia into Egypt, basically in the in the new empire of Egypt, basically the one that was started in Thebes, right by Ahmose and Kamose, who were the sons of Second Emry. But I don't want to really get into that. What I will say is that the empire of Cyaxares, would stretch from eastern Anatolia, basically over here, to the Caspian Sea, and south to the area of the Persians, which means the province of Fars. That's going to be the creche for the Persians. Fars or Fars. You could call it either or.
That came from what direction?
That would be going to the south of Iran.
South.
Okay? Yes,
And
John.
what was that? I didn't follow that. I understand
Okay,
you
this is
explained
the
this territory.
extent of the median control.
Right.
Okay? So you're going to have it going from eastern Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, eastern Anatolia, to the Caspian Sea, then to Fars, and then you're going to basically have an open empire to the east, and I'll explain that later. Now, first of all, listen carefully. Cyaxares' domain is not a tightly governed empire. It basically is like the Assyrians. It takes tribute from conquered people and homage from conquered people. It's gentler than the Assyrians, but it's basically a parasitic entity, like most empires are. I didn't hear that. Okay, now, with regard to the Medes, they would still fight wars. One of the major wars that they had was with an empire that was basically in western Turkey, and this was the empire of Lydia, where coinage is first done. And I'm sure you've heard of Croesus. Now, What I want to basically tell you that is that Persia at first was a tertiary area. Persia at first was a tertiary area, and Persia, which comes out of the province of Fars, right? Persia is first the tributary state of the Elamites. That's why I mentioned Elam. First, Persia owed Elam taxes. Then it would owe it to the Assyrians. And finally, the Medes. So the Medes are going to basically take over the areas that the Assyrians had, with the exception, of course, of Babylonia. Remember, Babylonia still is independent of the Medes. Now, I'm sorry, can you speak louder? Alan. The Elamites, okay, basically, then the Assyrians, and then the Medes, okay? That's who the Persians will basically owe homage to. Yes.
Okay, so we have the Medes and the Babylonians going together to get rid of the Assyrians.
Right? But then they each have their own empires. They're not going to co-rule. Babylon, the Chaldeans will have Babylonians and Byrons in Iraq, okay? And the areas that would include, of course, Palestine, right? Lebanon. But basically the Medes are going to have their empire north of that area and to the east.
So keep the temporary alliance.
It was a temporary alliance based on the your enemy and my enemy make us friends. Okay? Yeah. Anyone else?
So that was over basically the 7th century BC.
This is going
The Elites?
into the 6th century BC. We're now going to be talking about the period of 584 BC. And I'm going to tell you why. At 584 BC, you're going to have a fellow who is born of 2 royal houses. Okay, he is born of 2 royal houses. His name is Korush. Korush is known by a different name. He's going to be known by a name that Herodotus will refer to him as. He's going to call him Cyrus. Now listen to me carefully. What I'm going to tell you now about Cyrus, you don't have to write down. This is theater, this is entertainment. Because he had some interesting events associated with his early life that I want to go into with you. Okay? And basically we'll talk about when he ends up ruling Iran as a Shah, as an emperor. Okay, now, any questions before I go on? Okay, now, just listen carefully. Okay, please don't go into La La Land, pull out any texting devices. I need your brains to be with me, your adults, not children. Focus, okay? I'm not supposed to be like your 5-year-old. Now, many fanciful stories are going to develop regarding the birth of Cyrus. His mother is a Mede, and his father is a Persian. His father is a descendant of a Persian ruler named Achaemenid. And he's going to take his ancestor's name for his dynasty, which will be called the Achaemenids. Now, what are these fanciful stories with regard to the birth of Cyrus? There's some people believe that Cyrus was abandoned as a baby and raised by a she-wolf. Okay, so we're going into Romulus Remus territory here. Okay, there are others that believe he's the son of a Persian bandit and a shepherdess. There's a story that's related by Herodotus that before the birth of Cyrus, his Median grandfather, and this name you should know, Astyages. And for those of you that have taken my later Islamic civilization course, this story will seem interesting to you. Okay? From Herodotus, there's a story that before the birth of Cyrus, Cyrus's grandfather, Astyages, had a dream that a vine would sprout from the genitals of his daughter, Mandani, and send out tendrils which will engulf all of Asia. Priests will interpret the dream as being the birth of a son who will conquer Media and its surrounding areas. If this story seems a little familiar to you, I'm sure you remember the dream of Osman, okay, who had that same dream that basically led to people believing that he's going to found an empire that will conquer Constantinople. Okay? So with all these stories, you get the idea that Cyrus will be a man of destiny. Okay? Now, alarmed, Astyages would order his chief steward, you don't have to take down his name, just listen. He orders his chief steward, a man named Harpagus, to take the newborn Cyrus into the wilderness and kill him. Now Harpagus takes the baby into the wilderness, but when Cyrus starts to cry, Harpagus is moved by compassion and he gives Cyrus to the care of a mountain herdsman to raise him as his own. Okay? When Astyages learns of Harpagus' deception, he's going to kill and dismember Harpagus' son and serve him as dinner to his unknowing father. I don't know if that's as bad as maybe eating at McDonald's, but it's close enough. So basically, after that, of course, Harpagus will be killed. And let's talk about the early childhood of Cyrus minus the legends. Cyrus receives the basic education of a young Persian male. And this is what the Herodotus basically says is the education of a young Persian male. They basically do three things. They know how to ride a horse, draw a bow, and speak the truth. In 559 BC, Cyrus is going to succeed his father as ruler of the Persians. And the title that will be given to his father is Shah, a Persian word for king. And that's 559.
Shah is the name of his father, or his name of
No, a Shah means king in Persian. Do you play chess? Oh, okay. Anyone here play chess? The word checkmate comes from the Persian word shamat, king dead. Chess is a stylized form of war, and it originates in India and Persia about simultaneously. Okay? So you should know that Shah means king in Persian. Okay? Now, first of all, what Cyrus does is he appears to be a man of great talent. He is going to unify the bickering Persian tribes, the quarreling Persian tribes. And what he's going to do is he's going to create ties to the sophisticated civilization of Elam by rebuilding the ancient Elamite capital of Susa as his seat of administration. Sure. What Cyrus is going to do is he's going to unify the bickering Persian tribes and create ties to the sophisticated civilization of Elam by rebuilding the ancient Elamite capital of Susa and using it as a seat of administration. If you look at one of the sheets I gave you, one of the capitals of the Persian Empire will be the capital of Susa. It's seen as a great city for learning and culture. So what Cyrus is doing is, while he's building an empire, which is what he's beginning to do now, he's going to need a place for which he can rule, and a place which has an illustrious past as a place where urban people live, people who experience trade specialization, literacy. This is not a home for illiterate bumpkins and imbeciles. This is a place where people basically are skilled in numerical literacy and administration. They know how to govern. Now, technically speaking, Cyrus is a vassal to his grandfather, who is the emperor of the Medes, the king of the Medes. So in effect, he's a vassal, a servant of his grandfather. But disregarding his status as a vassal, Cyrus is going to conduct diplomatic relations. He's going to conduct diplomatic relations with Babylon, independent of Media, independent of his grandfather, which means he's going to carry on the functions of the state. Foreign affairs are a state function. He's not supposed to do that without his grandfather's consent.
So he goes against the Medes.
Exactly. And his grandfather.
So he conducts one more time.
Sure. He's going to conduct diplomatic relations with Babylon, America, independent of his grandfather, who is the king of Media. He's not supposed to do that. He's not an independent state. Kenny? We won't go that far. I'm going to tell you what happens after.
What happens to the Elamites?
Okay. The Elamites themselves, that are remains, will basically be ruled by Cyrus and his Persian entourage. But Cyrus will retain the Elamites who are beneficial to him, meaning the people that tended to be in government can keep the government. Why not? You know, if somebody is good, if nothing is broken, why fix it? If these guys will work for you and they're literate and they're capable, why not have them? Okay? Now, what's going to happen is Babylon is going to chafe under the increasingly antagonistic reign of Astyages, meaning that Babylon is seeing Astyages as a threat and Media as a threat. So they're okay with Cyrus. Now, why are people going to join Cyrus's army? Why will they rally to his banners? I'll tell you why. Yes?
Well, so Astyages is Cyrus'
grandfather. Yeah, his maternal grandfather. So you're actually going to see somebody that's not only rebelling against what would be considered to be his lord, to use a feudal term, but his actual grandfather, his mother's father. Yes? Because the Medes technically own Persia. So that means that they're supposed to be subject to the Media, and they're supposed to do what the Median king says, not what Cyrus says. Cyrus is supposed to be a servant of the Median king. He's, in effect, conducting his own independent government.
In one sense, it's not an unusual thing to subjugate people are always careful in fact, hoping that the overlord is weak.
Definitely.
That is how feudalism functions. I can assure you that. Don't know because usually in most things you have to be for your own family.
Very much so. And we're going to see with the Sassanid Persians, Khosrow, when he overthrows his father, is going to have his father shot to death by arrows. Okay? So he wasn't exactly son of the year. But, you know, in effect, you're going to see that type of enmity play out. Josh, and then we'll go to Matt.
So basically under Stooges' nose, he goes, takes over the Elamite capital, builds it up, brings in his own people and starts like making diplomatic relations with Babylon, and effectively he's like kind of moving
Think
away.
of Cyrus as usurping the Median authority.
Right. But he builds up his own kind of entourage, builds
Yes,
up his
he is.
own insular kind
That's
of
right.
thing.
That's right. Because you're never going to challenge someone, Josh, unless you have backup. Unless you have a definition. He needs to get people that are loyal to him. And before I field the next question, let me finish this out and I'll get back to Pamela. I believe that her hand up. People are going to join Cyrus's confederation for different reasons. And they're age-old reasons. It's from fear of punishment in the event that Cyrus is successful and they don't join him. And the hope of plunder, meaning in effect if Cyrus is successful, they could share in the largesse of plunder. Now, before I go on, Pamela, you had a question.
So when Persia becomes a tertiary area and
It was originally a tertiary area. Cyrus wants to make it a power on its own in its own right.
so at this time the Assyrians are gone, does he start to bring them back in, or they're released, or they're waiting to
Kiss the
war?
Assyrians goodbye. It
So they're gone.
It does. Okay. Shirley?
Chaldean Babylonian and Medes
Right.
It sounds like the Medes got
Under Astyages, the Medes will be very aggressive, and that will be toward the Babylonians as well. So what's going to happen is the Babylonians are going to gravitate more towards Cyrus because they're afraid of Astyages and his resurgent Median community. And that,
So after fighting together, the Babylonians now
oh, they got something. They got to rule in their own right. But what they do have that they're ruling over will be challenged later on by their one-time Median allies. Okay? I'm sorry?